Everyone, thanks for joining another webinar. This is Testing Business Ideas with AI. We're going to go through the extract map test system. So I'm going to share my screen, go through this with you all today, and hopefully come away with some ideas and how to incorporate AI into your de-risking process, because this is where the problem resides. All right. So my drawing is not working today, so we're going to do our best to do this without my iPad. It feels kind of weird. I don't know why it's not connecting, so we will do our best. Anyway, I'm going to record this, so you all will get this on the YouTube channel. So basically, I put all the recordings on the Precoil YouTube channel. This is the URL, so if you want to go check it out, please do so. There's a bunch of other recordings on there. We record all the podcasts are up there as well in audio format. And I also do just some helpful how-to videos there as well. So it's a great growing content channel. And please go like and subscribe. I guess that's what all the YouTubers say. Still learning YouTube. Okay, so I focus on de-risking ideas inside companies. And a lot of this is around how do we go through this and figure out how to make faster decisions by breaking down risk and testing risk. And so this is, I feel, the big constraint in the company at the moment that a lot of the companies I'm working with is that we can't keep up with the pace of decision making. And in doing so, we get overwhelmed. So you're not basically getting the decision making that keeps up with, the speed of AI, the amount of ideas coming through your funnel. The markets are shifting, political, geopolitical stuff is happening. So this idea of how do we make decisions has to change. Everything from our org structure to our processes, to our tooling, to our people. Who makes the decisions, how they make them. I've been interviewing a lot of executives for articles I've been writing over the last 6 months or so. And I keep hearing time and time again, we're not looking at the same data. Our org hierarchy doesn't necessarily support making fast decisions, and therefore it's bogging everything down. And these are companies that have done something really well and become quite successful at it. And these aren't all struggling companies. These are companies that are, the cream of the crop, so to speak, in the industry, and yet they still have a hard time, making decisions. So, I want to basically walk through some stuff with you all today. And again, apologies, I'm not using my iPad today, so it's become a bit weird to to try to draw for you all. So I work with all kinds of different companies. It's not necessarily industry specific. So for example, I don't necessarily, hold on a second. 1 second here. I'm going to try to reboot my iPad to see if I can, to see if a reboot works, and maybe it will let me draw for you all. So I don't necessarily focus on a specific industry. I would say early on in my career, it was more software. But I would say the last 5 or 10 years, it's been more hardware companies, B2B companies, manufacturing companies. I find it's interesting the draw of my work, who needs it the most, has changed over the years. And it's been really fun to help different types of companies in different industries. And I'm happy I have some case studies on the Precoil site now. We're updating case studies every month to get more of them out there. So you have stories to reference, of actual companies doing this work. So what I've noticed is AI isn't necessarily accelerating progress by generating ideas. And I think that is maybe not common knowledge across the industry yet. Because what I've seen is we're using AI for, one, it's a lot of different things, unfortunately. I think it's more of a, hey, go figure it out, and we will will find a use for it inside the company. And there's a lot of what people call FOMO. It's like fear of missing out. There's a lot of that going on in the AI community right now. And that is just driving me a bit crazy. Hey, my iPad came back. It's great. Again, we're doing it live. So I won't have to use the lame Zoom annotate feature anymore. Okay, so Reboot fixed it. I'm very happy about that. So with regards to AI, it doesn't necessarily accelerate what we need as far as getting things to profitability, is what I'm noticing. And I want to kind of visualize this for you all, because this is something that I think if it hasn't hit your company yet, it's going to be hitting your company soon. So if you think about your just overall commercialization process, your stage gate process, there are all kinds of different processes, but at a high level, right, you're going through this ideation process, and then you're selecting ideas from this, and then you're choosing which ones to invest in. And then obviously you're getting them out in front of people and doing what we call launch. You may frame it different ways. This is what I see happening inside companies right now. So I see the AI adoption being up here in Ideate, which I'm actually not against. I think it's kind of cool. I think the idea of being able to talk with your ideas, as surreal as that sounds, I think it's kind of cool. I've also seen some really interesting work here. A lot of the like kind of ex-strategy guys, or even former or current strategy guys, doing this. How do I talk with my canvas, and how do I apply different levels of thinking to my BMC or my VPC, business model canvas, via prop canvas. There's a lot of cool stuff going on there. I'm going to all these seminars and conferences, and I'm getting drawn more into the AI stuff as well. And I'm hearing stories of like, this is how we did a patent search, and then we cross-pollinated this stuff and came up with an idea that was not something we could have came up with ourselves. I think that's all cool. Here's the problem, though. This is like 10xing your ideas. And what's going on here is, if you think of this even like a funnel, it's just more and more stuff coming in because AI is accelerating the idea generation part. Right? And anybody in your company can come up with ideas. They just start tapping stuff in, and it happens. Where I see people getting overwhelmed, though, is here. So this is where your teams are like, what are we supposed to do with all this stuff coming through? Because we are a small team, or we are still doing this part manually. And so instead of like a funnel, it's almost like a bucket you have of all this stuff coming in. And this part is still super slow. And if you layer AI on top of a process that doesn't have a good foundation, you're kind of stacking risk. You're not necessarily using AI to reduce risk. You're basically increasing the problems you're going to have by adding it on a process that is kind of been a bit maybe outdated in the first place. So I don't know if you all are feeling this, but this is what I'm seeing inside companies. The idea of selection and investing and launch, and this idea of how do we address risk? Okay, how do we address risk? This is not where I see AI used currently, except outside my work. I'm seeing it used up here for ideation, which is great, but I don't want to put on like my Eli Goldratt hat here for a moment, but your constraint moves around your organization. And I think before, where a company might have had, hey, we have 3 to 5 ideas and one of these has to work, we know that isn't going to produce a serious revenue generating opportunity if you're only betting on 3 to 5 ideas. Okay. Power law curve, everything that we've seen is you have to try hundreds of ideas. Okay. So that part I believe is getting solved by AI, but the risk reduction part, I'm seeing it just become completely overwhelmed, because now we have all this stuff coming in and we're trying to filter through. And decisions are ultimately, people. You can't defer all your decisions to AI. So what I like to do here in my work, and I'm just being really transparent with all you, that's why I'm doing these webinars, is I call this like human in the loop. I didn't necessarily coin that. I learned it first coming out at MIT. But this idea of going through and working with AI and not necessarily doing something like this where you're just giving stuff and going forward. We're not necessarily using it as we're going to dump everything in here and then it's going to like produce an output and that's going to be what we use. That is not necessarily what I'm seeing being successful right now. I'm seeing this, look, we're going to put some stuff in, we're going to manually review it, we're going to get some aha moments because it's going to think of things that we had considered, and it's going to think about how we can reduce risk in ways maybe we haven't considered. And that loop, I find, is where the companies are seeing real success that I'm working with anyway. So I think what I'm seeing the need for, and this is building off, decades of work from what I've been doing, is that we need a system where we kind of work with AI to reduce uncertainty. So we need something repeatable inside the company, something that we can augment the way we're working, because we're using AI in different parts and it's generating more work. But then the bottleneck becomes the completely manual processes that we're having, and you're not seeing the end-to-end value that you should see inside your company. So this is where I've been taking my EMT system, call its extract, map, test. I'm going to cover a little bit with you today. I'm not going to deep dive on it because we don't have time to go through all of it. But I do want to talk about how I'm interweaving AI into it, because I think that's going to be beneficial to all of you. And I'll have a call to action at the end here if you want to chat with me further after the webinar. So EMT is sort of my evolution of my work over the last 15 years. And what I've been doing is trying to find ways to integrate this work, because one things that really annoy me are what I call like innovation theater, or things where people have stickies all over the walls and canvases all over the walls, and then they don't actually use them in their day-to-day work in any meaningful way. That bugs me. And maybe I'm just getting older and crankier, but I want to see this work matter. I want to see you actually de-risk, and I want to see you have more profitable ideas that actually have an impact in the world. So the way this works is essentially it's like a system, but if you think about it, there are different inputs and there's some flexibility in how to integrate the system. And that's a lot of my org change work kind of pulls from this, because I was crazy enough to lead org transformations in the past. So maybe I'm a bit skewed on how I look at things. But this idea of how do we extract risk, right? You can extract risk from many different things. Yes, it can be canvases. It can be your roadmap. It can be your executive slide deck. It can be from your backlog. I feel as if we need to open our system up a bit and not be constrained to, you have to use this tooling before we'll extract risk from it, because risk resides in so many of the artifacts we use inside of our organization. Every time I look at a sequenced roadmap, I just cringe. Like, that's sequenced risk. We're looking at this phase to this phase, and we're assuming this is going to unlock this, and it's a bit of theater. So the idea of extracting risk is something I'm very passionate about, because I've seen it work inside companies. So I'm going to play with a fun one today. For those of you who follow me online, you might have seen me do like this example before. But we're going to say, hey, we have an AI feature that predicts health issues for cats, and it's on our wearable cat health monitoring device. So let's say we want to add a feature, like an AI-related feature to this, and it's going to cost $15 a month. And of course, we're going to target, San Francisco. I have to make fun of San Francisco a little bit. I mean, I was in Silicon Valley for like 10 years, so I think I've earned the right to make fun of it a little bit. So this idea of, hey, it's something risky. I think the cat's adorable. I don't think my cat would wear that, by the way. It's something really cool that we can add in. I don't know if you've ever got ideas thrown at you this way, but these ideas seem to happen, especially if they're AI generated. So how do we go about looking at the risk in this? Well, one way is through prompting. Now, this is how I got started with a lot of this, is just kind of working with ChatGPT. I think a lot of you probably started there too, or with Gemini. This idea of, can I give it instructions to extract risk for me? I would say this has evolved quite a bit over the years. However, you do need to be pretty prescriptive about the themes of risk. So I use DVF, or desirable, viable, feasible, pulling from design thinking. And you have to really be, specific on the prompts. And sometimes people get tired of writing these prompts all the time. It's like, oh, I got to copy paste the prompts in again and do this. Like, there's a way to do this, but also it becomes kind of cumbersome, and it's not necessarily streamlining your process when you're pasting in prompts all the time. But it is a way that you can use like LLMs to extract. If you're trying to automate things a bit more, I just released a free open source Claude skill that you can just go to my LinkedIn page and find. It's free. Where it's more agentized, you can go and you can not have to paste things in every time. You can kind of have it extract from different things. It's kind of the next evolution of this work. And here are some examples you'll get. So you'll get, your desirable, viable, and feasible assumptions. You can get things like what's the tension between each of these, and call out, because it's really hard to unpack those risks sometimes. When you say DVF, people are like, oh, but they're all so tightly bundled. How do I begin to unpack them? I get it. I've done this enough over the years where there is some tension in it. It's worth calling it out. But there are things you can do with Claude that's really interesting. You can also use Gemini. You can use, agents. You can do all kinds of different stuff here. But the idea is I'm using AI to assist me with the assumption extraction. However, you will get, a list or a series of lists from doing that, which is helpful when you're de-risking process. However, you also should do it with your teams manually. I really find that the value here, there's a lot of overlap in the lists you're going to get from your team and from the AI, especially teams that are well versed at this. But the value I find in this using AI is in the edges. So what are some things that the team came up with that AI did not? And what are some of the things that AI came up with that the team did not? So I find in these edges, this is where we're getting value from using AI in our de-risking work. It's not necessarily deferring the entire de-risking process to AI, because AI doesn't hold accountability for things it's missing. And sometimes, things go awry and you have to check your work, of course. But I find if you use a team, go through the mapping exercise or extraction exercise, go to AI, use that as well, and then compare. And I'll show you how this works. I'll give a demo of how this works with you all too. So I find there's value in that. In the combination. When we talk about human in the loop, it's not necessarily I'm just giving everything to AI and having it extract and then moving on. It's both. Same thing with mapping. Now, with mapping, I would say what I'm finding really interesting is we're trying to prioritize on importance, and evidence. And ideally, we're trying to get to what we call like the riskiest assumptions, or we can call them leap of faith assumptions. There's a different way to frame it, but we're trying to get the things that are most important with the least amount of evidence. Early on, I thought, well, let's have AI help prioritize this. I'm backing off of that more and more because I'm finding it really hard to give it the context it needs to do a prioritization there. And again, who owns the prioritization? Well, you do, your team does. So what I'm seeing work a little better is we do it manually. So we still go and we do, this is someone doing one in a session I hosted, where we're going through and we're mapping things out as a team, going through the DVF themes. And, we might have something digitally too, like this is a mural board. And we're looking at AI to give us feedback on, okay, what did we miss? Or how would you evaluate this maybe differently than we have? So when you go in and you're starting prompting for your instructions, you're trying to say, okay, well, you're a senior experimentation strategist, and we're working on decision risk here. How do we look at this and give feedback and evaluate this? And I would say this is a lot of the work I do in my coaching and advising in companies, because they'll want to help facilitate it. But a lot of people know how to do assumptions mapping now. There's plenty of content online for this. But they pull me in to critique it. Like, what were we missing? What were we thinking? Could we move something over? And I think there's some different things at work here. One is that we hate being wrong. We want our map to be 100% accurate. In reality, it's not going to be. You are taking your best guess at where things are today based on what you know. And you're going to learn more when you go through the process and you come back and update your map, rearrange your assumptions. So I think there's something maybe deeper going on there with teams where they don't want to be wrong. That aside, we also need to look at it critically and say, okay, what could have we done better? Are there some anti-patterns here? I've seen enough assumptions maps over the years where I can kind of almost like squint at your assumptions map and tell, ooh, you've kind of taken a lot of your light evidence, like survey and customer interviews, and you've moved it all the way to the other side, and you think you've validated everything because people told you they wanted it. We need some other evidence, to generate this decision before we go forward. So there are some things I've seen. But having it review and provide options. The same thing with Claude. I do this with Claude. Again, this is in the skill that I released. You can start looking at, and I put I don't want to say my brain inside the skill, but I spent a lot of time working on the skill. So it kind of uses the way I would critique your map. And so this idea of placement, like how have you placed things? What does your DVF coverage look like? So let's say, for example, I like color codings. So when we use desirable, we use the orange stickies, right? When we do viable, we use the green stickies. And when we do feasible, we use the blue stickies. You can use whatever colors you want. I just like those colors. However, if I see your assumptions map and it's just all blue, then I know we're not considering the customer enough, the pricing, the cost, all the desirable, viable stuff. So I know that this team has some work to do, right? So if you feed it a map and it's all blue, it's going to give you that feedback that you're missing some risks around your customer and their jobs to be done and the cost and pricing. So things like that. Also, some assumptions to consider or reconsider. This idea of maybe you could say, this looks like it's here, but have you considered X, Y, and Z? And then what's working. It doesn't just shred everything. I know I try not to, completely roast your map, although that might be a fun tool to build someday, just roast my map. But the idea here is using AI to provide feedback on your assumptions map. So how can I do that and essentially be able to get feedback on something I've created versus having it create it for you? And I think early on, this is what we were trying to do. We were putting in an idea. We were trying to have it just extract everything automatically. We were trying to have it prioritize everything automatically, design our tests, everything. And what I'm seeing with this human in the loop approach, it's much more impactful. Your output is much better, and humans ultimately own the decisions. So why we want to have AI help us, we don't necessarily want to give our power away to AI. So when I think about this, it's like decisions are social in nature and they involve other humans, reputation, and accountability. So, when you think about how you're using AI, be thinking like, am I giving my accountability away in the way I'm using AI? Am I trusting it too much? Are we leaning on it too much here? I think with the ideation piece, I'm less worried about this. I'm more worried about this in the de-risking piece and how we implement AI in other parts. So finally, it's tests. So EMT, right? Extract, map, and test. One of the reasons I wrote the Testing Business Ideas book was to get all the tests out there that I coach teams on and organizations on, and just get it out there in book form so people can run with it. When we think about testing, here's where AI kind of falls down, in my opinion. What I've seen is it gives pretty generic answers because it's trained on unproven business advice. So you can use it to extract your risk. You can use it to give feedback on mapping your risk. But when it comes to just generating experiments, it has a really hard time. And it'll hallucinate experiments. It will tell you to go off and just like, would you use this? Or how likely are you to buy? I am sure there are business books it's taking this advice from, or blog posts, or maybe Reddit, who knows? Startup Reddit's kind of a train wreck, so it might be pulling from there too. But this idea of like run a focus group, just go ahead and build the whole solution. I would say, personal story here. I ran a workshop several years ago. And it was when like kind of ChatGPT just started becoming on the scene. And I watched somebody take all the content from my workshop and feed it into ChatGPT and ask it what it should do about the idea they had, which was a completely new idea, a lot of uncertainty. And it literally said, just build, like build the whole thing right away and sell it. And I was like, okay, they fed all of my material into this and it's telling them to like, how can it possibly come to that conclusion based on my material? So I don't want to say I'm working with this out of spite, but I'm really frustrated by seeing people ask kind of like the generic model what to do, and it tells you stuff like this. Like, would you buy this? Would you use this? Let's go to a focus group and see what they think. Let's just build the whole thing first and launch. Like this is not sound advice in the year of 2026. So what I've seen is that it's only as good, so AI is only good as the evidence it reasons over. And if you don't have validated experiment data guidance, it just becomes guesswork. It doesn't have something to pull from that's a proven reference library. And this is what pulled me to the solution of, well, how do we create that library? You know, how do we give it a library that it can give proven advice and not just hallucinate and say, go run a focus group? So one way to think about this is I'm calling this like a kind of like a decision infrastructure layer. But where I'm at in my present thinking is taking experiments and all this coaching I've done for the last 15 years and getting it into a format where you can kind of feed in, you know, your assumptions, you know, you have your DVF, you have this idea of like, what are these patterns? We can get a framework, kind of like an infrastructure here that's sort of like LLM agnostic. It's not really a hosted solution, you know, it's a series of CSV and JSON with the logic built into the library, and give you the ability to sort of integrate it into your work for the way that it makes sense for you. And I see this in different ways. Like some people go all in on these internal copilots. Some people hate Copilot and they want to build their own RAG systems, or they want, like, I'm less passionate about a specific kind of tool. I'm more passionate about getting the results. So whatever tooling you use, I'm kind of tool agnostic at this point in my career. But having something it can reference, so it suggests experiments that make sense for your context. Because this is what I do in my advising. When I'm running like these decision sprints and programs and infrastructure and everything, I am tailoring like playbooks and decision infrastructure for organizations. So getting this into a way where we're not overwhelmed with the AI generated ideas so that we can use AI here, but use it in a responsible way. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you're on the hook for whether that thing flopped in the market or not. And so being able to use it thoughtfully and responsibly is the way forward, in my opinion. So what I want to do, and this is sort of just kind of ad hoc demo, so this is a webinar, I can kind of do whatever I want. So I want to show you an example, and I will, so this is, you can just go to precoolergpt.com and just like log, it's not paid or anything. You can just like register with your username, password, and get in. So what I want to show you though, is I want to show you how this works in practice so that you have something kind of latch on to and bring away from this webinar. So I am going to jump over to the live site, and it's a live demo, so we'll see how it goes. So what this is, so at a high level, this is built on top of the library, okay? So the experiment library, where I have, I think it's over 50 experiments. They're all categorized by experiment, type, subtype, setup time, runtime, evidence strength, sequences. So before, recommended before, recommended next, recommended pairings, all that stuff, all built into the library. Because I got frustrated with it recommending bad stuff. So you have to be frustrated to spend the amount of time I have doing this. Okay, So what we're going to do is I'm just going to join a session. You all can actually join the session if you want. If you click join session, I'm just going to paste in a code. So I'm going to paste in this code, which is for our webinar today. It's EMTMAR 10, all caps. So some of you maybe already have Precola GPT accounts. If not, like I said, it's free to sign up. You should get an email. You're in there. So basically, I created a session for us where I'm going to walk through what this looks like. And I'm going to use the cat idea just because it's fun. And I don't know. I think cat wearables are an interesting space right now. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, first off, you're looking at the EMT kind of flow with AI being like a helper. So I'm going to say, you know what? Here's my idea. So let's say you've already done it manually as a team. Okay. And you're like, you know what? I wonder if there's some we missed as a team. So we basically said, we wrote down on blue, green, and orange stickies what our assumptions were. And we want to see AI come up with some that maybe we hadn't considered. Right. So that's what it does. So we put in our idea. We kind of extract. It should run this pretty quickly. So basically, it's going to come back with desirable, viable, and feasible, unless everyone's pounding it right now. And of course, it might implode. It's usually taking a little longer than it normally does, I have to say. So basically, there we go. So what it's going to do is it's going to start coming back with the assumptions. Now, I've built in some logic here about how I write assumptions and how I recommend writing assumptions. So it's using I believe or we believe. It's categorizing by desirable, viable, feasible. You would think that would be easy to do, but it's not. It hallucinates quite a bit, and you have to be very strict in your logic behind the scenes to get it not to put pricing stuff inside desirability. I think I've got it all weeded out at this point, but it does frustrate me when I see pricing stuff come up here. So it's saying, I believe cat owners perceive this as like, beneficial. I believe they're comfortable with this. It's like it kind of really trust this. With viability, it's pretty straightforward. Are they going to pay for this? Is this fee? Is it going to? This one's kind of long. I would probably break this up into multiple. And some more about the cost and all the churn. And then feasibility, I honestly don't spend a lot of time in feasibility anymore, but it has some about, can we actually do this? So if you did this as a team and you're like, you know what, we hadn't considered this one. Maybe this is something we need to include. And I also have the rationale here. So it's giving you some rationale of why I came up with that, not just an assumption. What I've noticed early on in my career is when I started incorporating AI into my work, that people wanted an explanation of why this was returned. Like, why was this generated? What's the reasoning behind this? So I like having rationale there. It's totally up to you. So that's the extract part. Now, what would mapping look like with AI assisting us? Again, I am not asking it to prioritize for me as much anymore. I'm asking it to give feedback. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag in my cat assumptions map. This was the one I showed you earlier on the slide, the 2x2 that was in Mural. Just took a screenshot of it. And I'm going to say, give me feedback on this map. We did this manually. So taking a step back, we extracted manually. Like, you know what, maybe we're missing stuff. Let's use AI to generate some assumptions. Okay, now we have a better list. Let's go map those manually, importance and evidence as a team. Now let's get feedback on, is there something we should consider that maybe we missed, or something that we're not thinking of? This is the same thing I would do if I brought in a stakeholder to see your map, or a domain expert that maybe couldn't make the session, or what I do as an advisor. So then it gives you feedback, and it's like, you know what, this is actually pretty sensible. You do have coverage across DVF. Your formatting's not bad, and here's some things you could think about, right? So it's basically saying, obviously I didn't put a really messed up all blue sticky map up there for you. Maybe that's next webinar. But it's going through and evaluating as I would, on top. So again, assisting, but not necessarily doing it for you. And then when it comes to testing, this is where I think teams get stuck, because they're like, well, I know how to do interviews, surveys, landing pages, maybe. That's kind of it. If you limit your learning to only the experiments you are comfortable with, you are going to miss out on a lot of opportunities. And you're going to have more surprises at the end when you when you launch that thing and you're like, oh, I wish we'd have ran this other test that would have helped us learn what we need to learn. So, so this is where the library comes in. So a proven library saying, here is what would match your riskiest assumption. So in this case, I'm just going to put mine in. I'm going to say, you know what? We looked at our map. We like this one. We're really worried about. And it's a desirability one. So what kind of experiments go along with that? Now, when you think of AI assistant, really, yeah, could you do that and just put it in ChatGPT or put it in Claude and see what comes back? Sure. Again, I haven't had good luck with that. Maybe you will. But when you get your recommendations here, this is pulling from the actual structured library. Now that library, granted, I built this on top of the library. You could integrate it however you need, and I can give you integration documents if you're curious about that. But it's pulling back, okay, for that desirability based on where you are in your journey. Obviously, yes, you can do customer interview, but you could also do storyboard. You can do some feature stubs. You can do link tracking, do search trend. So what it's doing is pulling from the library, and then everything's categorized with how to run. Obviously, if you're going to do like a search trend analysis, it's good to know how to do that. What I found is that companies start off with this version of it, and then they customize it to meet their needs. Like, what's the tooling they use for this? So this is fully customizable once you get it integrated. But let's say, let's run a story, let's do a search trend. Let's say we want to do that. So what you can also do is build these helpers to help your teams design your experiments. Now, it shouldn't design the experiment for you. Like, these are all editable fields. So basically it's saying, hey, we're going to do search trend analysis. We're going to start this today. We're going to run it for a week. Here's the assumption. You can tweak that. Here's how you could do it, right? And you still have your helper text here. You can go in and reference this if you want to change stuff. But use AI to help you craft experiments inside your company versus having a team just have this blank slate or blank canvas problem, blank sheet problem, where they just get overwhelmed and they're like, I don't have no idea how to test this. Yeah, I got the testing business ideas book. I can flip through 200 pages and try to find the one that could help me. But I find that teams sometimes get overwhelmed with the actual testing part. And you don't really reduce risk until you can complete your tests, And I think we forget about that sometimes. It's like, oh, let's go back and reanalyze. I had a workshop in San Francisco last month, and we were walking through how to test, and people were like, oh, but you know what? Instead of running that test, let's go back and just reanalyze everything. It's like, no, let's run the test. Let's run the test and use that, those insights to shape what we do next. And so that loop matters. And teams get stuck. I don't know if you've seen this, but I've seen teams get stuck. And now they get stuck even more because there's all this AI-generated ideation coming in. And then they're like, how do I test all this? It's just overwhelming. So the idea of using it responsibly, it really excites me because you could say, oh, well, what do you recommend based off of a proven library? How would I design this experiment? And then you can download it to Markdown, whatever you need. But it's less about using this specific tool, like this is just something I've built to help me and my teams. But if you have the infrastructure, it gives you flexibility on what you can build. And it's a pretty exciting time, actually. I think it's more exciting than the ideation, but maybe it's just me and my work. But I don't find the ideation particularly all that interesting, honestly. I think ideation is like, how to describe this? It's the easy part, in my opinion, not to offend anybody who does ideation work on the call. I feel like it's the testing of the ideas is the hard part. And so anyway, what I want you to take with you today from this webinar is I want you to think through, okay, the way I'm using AI in my company, is it really reducing risk? Because I'm not seeing it reduce risk. I'm seeing it maybe even increase risk because we're using it, we're almost like deferring our power to it, where I think the real impactful work we're going to do is using it with us as humans. And we're going to use it to help surface assumptions that maybe we hadn't considered. Remember, value on the edges. We're going to help us focus our decisions and help us design evidence and our experiments based on, a proven library. So I'm really excited where I'm taking this EMT system. It's kind of re-energized me in a lot of my work because let's face it, like 7 out of 10 ideas I work on fail inside companies. So having a system, having a way to make that more efficient is all about. That's where I'm focused for the near term. And so this idea of, okay, Where are we at? Can we use this to help extract our risk and map it and then test the things that we need to test and not be locked into specific tooling, but look at it from more of a principle level. At a principle level, how do we look at risk in this thing we have? How do we prioritize it, map it? How do we go test it? What does that look like for our pipeline? So an offer I'm going to give to all of you before we wrap up today is, I live and breathe this work. I do this all the time. And what I'm going to offer to you is a limited number of sessions where you can reach out to me and we'll just spend a day on something that you're stuck on and show you how to implement this. All right. So this is just one of the formats I use. Obviously, I run sprints and programs and a bunch of bigger things. But I want to just offer this up to you all because you hung out with me for the webinar. This will be recorded, so I'll post this online. However, if you scan that QR code, that'll link to my Calendly, and I have a few spots open if you want to hang out and have feedback on what is this idea that has a lot of uncertainty, and we want to use AI. Maybe it was even an AI-generated idea. And we want to use this tooling to de-risk that because we're worried about the outcome. Okay. So I want to thank you all for hanging out with me today. It's been fun doing these webinars. I'm going to continue doing them. You'll probably see never the same webinar twice because my thinking on this is always evolving. But I just appreciate all of you. Good luck in your testing journeys. And as always, you can always reach out and take care. Thanks.